right, and to the conversation of the day. Today it's all about hypersexuality, or if you want, compulsive sexual behavior. And of course, the question that we're asking you is, do you consider hypersexuality disorder? Again, do you consider hypersexuality a disorder? Keep tweeting us NTV Kenya at Lubembe_Winnie. And of course, we look forward to hear what you have to say as far as this whole topic is concerned, and that is on compulsive sexual behavior. And of course, once again, just to give you what the conversation is all about, let's just first understand what hypersexuality is. Well, hypersexuality, it's an excessive preoccupation with sexual fantasies, urges, or behaviors that are difficult to control. All right. And of course, then the question is, what does hypersexuality involve? Well, it involves a lot of things like masturbation, cybersex, multiple sexual partners, use of pornography, paying for sex as well. And of course, those are some of the things. And then symptoms of hypersexuality, well, recurrent and intense sexual fantasies, urges, and behaviors that take up a lot of your time. Trying unsuccessfully to reduce or control your sexual fantasies, urges, or behavior. Those are some of the symptoms that we're looking at. Others include use of compulsive sexual behavior as an escape from other problems such as loneliness, depression, anxiety, or stress. Continue to engage in sexual behaviors that have serious consequences, trouble establishing and maintaining healthy and stable relationships. And you might ask, so then when do you see a doctor? Well, when you think you may cause harm with uncontrolled sexual behavior, that is when you seek help. And then when you have other problems with impulse control, and you feel like your sexual behavior is slipping out of control, and also when you are suicidal. All right, and of course, just to give us more, emphasis as far as compulsive sexual behavior is concerned, take a look at this story.
It started with the emptiness that I would feel after some sexual experiences, and it was an emptiness, but there was also sometimes a regret. Like I would hook up with someone and then the next day look at them and just be like, I don't even know why I did this, because I didn't enjoy the experience. That was the major thing that was like, oh, okay, I think I need to look into this. I've been someone who has been very vocal about sex online, but in this context, healthy sex. But before then, I was talking about sex, and so for some reason that would draw people to me. I think for me, the major thing was realizing that a lot of times, even though I didn't want to engage with them, I would find myself almost compulsively engaging with them. Then it's like, but why am I giving in, you know? Because for me, the issue was I wasn't addressing the pain, the emotional pain that I was in. I wasn't addressing the trauma that I had been experiencing. And at the same time, instead of validating myself and discovering ways to love myself, I was looking for other people to validate me. In the same way that I knew I had depression was the same way I knew that I was hypersexual. It was looking at my behavior and reading about it and being like, wow, this is actually sounding like me. It usually is a symptom of something, whether that's a mental disorder such as bipolar or unresolved pain, trauma. Like usually there's something attached. It's sort of like what we're realizing now with addiction, that the issue is not addiction. It's the thing that is feeding the addiction, which is usually trauma. So when that was resolved, the hypersexuality, and help doesn't have to be immediately going to like therapy or going to see a psychologist, because I think sometimes that tends to intimidate people. But reaching out even to your support system first, finding just one person who you can share this with, and research, like read about it. Knowledge would really help you get out of your head about it and take away some of the stigma and judgment that you might have.
All right, and of course, that is Terry's experience as far as hypersexuality is concerned, and to help us understand more as far as compulsive sexual behavior or hypersexuality, or some people tend to term it as sex addiction. We have Dr. Joachim Osur, who is a sexologist, joining us via Zoom. Good morning, Dr. It's so good to see you this morning.
Good morning, and thank you for inviting me.
All right. And of course, we also have Catherine Bao, who is a psychologist and a psychiatrist as well. Thank you very much, Catherine. I call you Kate. It's so good to see you after a while. How are you doing this morning?
I'm doing fine.
All right.
Thank you, Winnie.
All right. And of course, thank you very much, Kate, as well, for, joining us as well via Zoom. Now, we actually defined hypersexuality, and of course, there's so many, terms that came out of it. But just to make it in a layman's language, to help people really understand what hypersexuality, or rather compulsive sexual behavior is. Kate, what would you say? Let's start with you.
Um, in a layman's language, hypersexuality is what sometimes back was referred to as a sex addiction. And it's the preoccupation with the sexual act. And it's anything that is sexual. So you find that most of your time you're thinking about sex, how to gratify it or how to get it. So we'll say compulsive behavior, which you defined it very well, Winnie, when you started. It's compulsive behavior around sexuality. So masturbation, pornography, having sexual activity that is out of the norm. So when you say out of the norm is when someone is designed to have sex 5 or 6 times a day.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I mean, the Carrie, what's normal and what's not normal in this sense? Because again, sexual desire is considered somewhat normal, like it's in our primal nature, to have some of these desires, right? But then again, so what's not normal? I mean, and this is difference between someone who has like a higher sex drive as compared to someone who struggles with hypersexuality. Where is the disconnect?
Yes, so it is very important to discuss that, because sexual desire is normal and it is important. If you're lacking desire, you're actually sick. You're supposed to have desire for sex. So that is why it is very important to distinguish normal desire from hypersexuality. I want to give an example. If I've had cases come to see me where someone has had sex with their wife in the night, they wake up in the morning, they pass through a prostitute den or a brothel, they have sex with a prostitute on their way to the office. They are in the office, and then they have sex over lunch in the office with someone else. And somewhere in between, they are watching porn and they are masturbating. Now, that is not normal. And they use a lot of their resources and time chasing for sex. And so when you find two professionals, for example, who are earning the same amount of money, one is investing in a real estate something, and the other is using a lot of their money buying porn, buying sex in the streets, planning and getting to places where they can have sex. And when you ask them whether they're really enjoying this whole scenario, they tell you they want to stop. In fact, many of them are praying that God helps them stop, but they are unable to. They don't have the internal ability to just say no to what they don't want. And then there are a lot of consequences they face, and they regret it. They may face a divorce situation. They may have contracted a disease, and they don't want it. They feel painful about what they are going through, but they just can't stop it. They lack the internal ability to say no to what is really harmful for their lives.
All right. And Victoria, I'm pretty sure someone is watching and struggling to understand. So how is it that you spend a lot of resources, a lot of time to fulfill this desire, but then again, you don't enjoy it?
Yeah, so that is the irony of it.
Yeah.
That it is like alcohol. You know, when the urge for alcohol comes and you want to take alcohol because you're addicted to it, you feel like it is what is going to save your life. You're dying without taking it. But the moment you take it and you're drunk and you do something messy, you feel very bad about it. And every day when you talk to someone who is addicted, they always tell you, I will stop. In fact, they try to stop, but they don't. And so it is sweet pain. It is sweet pain. It relieves the pressure from you. You feel relief when you do it, but you're hurting because you don't want to do it. But the pressure is so much that you cannot do without it.
All right. And how common is compulsive sexual behavior, Dr. Harriet, especially in the country?
Whenever we talk about hypersexuality, first people think it's just men who suffer it. It affects both men and women.
But do we have one that suffers the most?
Yeah, men suffer more. I mean, there are more men. It's estimated that about 6% of men are hypersexual and about 3 to 4% of women. When we change those statistics into numbers and you look at adult Kenyans, we are basically talking about 1 million Kenyans being hypersexual. So it's a big number of people who are suffering out there. And I was going to say that I meet both of them. I meet men and women. I remember I met a lady and I was asking her, so how many men have you had sex with this month? And she couldn't remember. She said maybe something close to 20.
In a month?
It's not about, she's not a sex worker. And she's not doing it just for the money. She's doing it because of the urge. And you find, because of this, you find yourself low self-esteem, all these troubles in your mind and emotions. They're also using drugs sometimes to counter that pain, or a lot of alcohol in addition to this sexual behavior. So the numbers are big. It is complicated. It's both male and female.
All right. And for men, you see, most of the times people would argue and say, listen, for man, it's somewhat normal because men tend to either think about it or perform the act more as compared to the women. So would also want to understand why, really, as far as then the men, what is considered normal for men and what is not considered normal, that we get a higher number of people, men rather, being affected by compulsive sexual behavior or hypersexuality. But Kate, let's come back to you and get to understand more about the disorder in compulsive sexual behavior. Where does the disorder then come in?
The disorder comes in with different aspects to what actually makes this person get to that level. So there are different reasons as to why. It's not yet established as a disorder, but we do have comorbidities that will come up with that. So there's still debate on whether sexual hyperactivity is a disorder because it is a reward system. So one of the reasons that sometimes we see this is if there's damage to the brain, the frontal lobe and the hypothalamus, which is the reward system. If there have been sexual trauma in the child's or in the person's life previously, or there's comorbidity of other conditions such as bipolar, being on the spectrum, sometimes they can't, and compulsive obsessive behavior. So in this particular instance, it's something that they're trying to deal with. That's why compulsive sexual behavior is yet to clearly be defined as a disorder. What is looked at is what drives that desire to have sex. So are they having sex to regulate themselves, or are they having sex because it's a learned behavior? Are they sexually acting out? And that's why it comes up with mixed feelings of guilt because the person feels out of control,
Yeah.
but they're trying to regulate themselves.
All right. But then the problem is that they're not able to stop it, much as they really, really try
Yeah.
to stop the same. Now, and of course, we all know that hypersexuality is not yet included in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, what's you
Yeah.
usually call DSM-5. So then, how is it categorized then?
So it is categorized as, I know with process addiction, because it's a process addiction, it's very hard to categorize it as a disorder. Because to start with, sex in itself, as Dr. Ari said, is not a problem. And sometimes the society might demonize or stigmatize people who are who have a high sexual libido. So there's a difference between a high sexual libido and someone who is trying to regulate themselves with the sex. So how do we deem it as a disorder, or when does it become a disorder? Is, as Dr. Ari said, when the person is preoccupied and their life is impaired. And when we say their life is impaired, their relationships are impaired. We see many of them having broken relationships because they got into relationships with people who don't understand. So people get hurt because of that, and there's no proper processing of what is happening to this person. There's a lot of shame attached to that. Impaired in terms of work. They're not able to sit still because they're thinking about sex. If they go to their boss, they're thinking about having sex with them or whatever, or gratifying. So work is also impaired. Or if they're now for children or adults under the spectrum who have not gone through social skills, they will sexually act out in the open, which also again is not normal. So it depends on what comorbidity this person is having. So we know bipolar sometimes has it during the manic phase. We know some people who have depression sometimes have sexual hyperactivity because during that phase of time, they do have a certain gratification. But the worst bit is the shame they feel afterwards and the guilt and loss of control. So in terms of looking forward is how to treat the reward system. What is it that the sexual hyperactivity, and we're about to have a guest. My cat is about to join me. I'm sorry about that.
Okay. All right, Kate. But then again, I have a question really as far as, again, mental illnesses and hypersexuality is concerned, because I was listening to one psychologist and she was saying sometimes people with bipolar, and especially like you rightly put, in the manic phase is when, this manifests, like cases of like hyper sexual, maybe like desires and stuff. So she was saying, this is not it. It doesn't mean that then they are struggling with hypersexuality. It's just that it is a phase and they will come out of it. So for people with, like, for example, bipolar, anxiety disorder, depression, like you said earlier on, it's a phase. So do we then say that they have, or they have like compulsive sexual behavior, or it's just a phase and then it will actually fade?
Okay, the thing about compulsive sexual behavior, as the more they do it, they get used to that reward system and that behavior. So putting a thin line between it is very hard. So you realize people who have, not all people who have bipolar, by the way, do have that phase where they're sexually activated and they want multiple partners. But as much as it's part of it, we do recognize that the person is having a hard time to deal with it. But you'll find someone who has bipolar, they will have different sexual partners, or their sexual libido is high, but it doesn't mean they're impaired. It doesn't mean they're hyper-focusing on that, but they will have multiple people during that time. But if they're impaired during that time, then we'll call it, as much as they have bipolar, they might be having also compulsive sexual behavior because it's impairing them. Even when they are on the depressive side, the depression could be because of the guilt of the aftermath of the manic phase.
Yeah, I'm also interested to understand more about depression and compulsive sexual behavior, because what we understand about depression is like a long period of sadness. You know, this person does not want to do anything, does not want to associate with people, just wants to be alone all the time. So then how is it that, you know, they might have like phases of compulsive sexual behavior? But we'll come to you, Kate, on that for just a moment. But Dr. In terms of then I mean, given the different causes for the same is like changes in brain pathways and imbalance in natural brain chemicals, conditions that affect the brain, which Kate highlighted some of them. But you also want to highlight some of the other causes. I'm trying to figure out, does like environment contribute to cases of compulsive sexual behavior?
Yeah, first, I think it's also important to say that when you think of hypersexuality and mental health or psychiatric problems, there are those that they are psychiatric problems which present with a symptom of hypersexuality, like bipolar, which Catherine has talked about. But then there are also psychiatric problems that come because someone has hypersexuality. So there are those who start from the point of they're hypersexual, and because of the behavior, because of the trauma they are going through, because of the shame and the loss of self-esteem, they then get into anxiety, they then get into depression, they then get into other problems. So there is that distinction. Now, when it is because of, the starting point is not the hypersexuality itself, then maybe it is better to call it a symptom of that other disease. It could be bipolar. Sometimes it could even be a biological problem. I've met people with abnormal high testosterone or other hormones who become hypersexual because of the biological problem. But so that should be distinguished, and we should treat the cause, which is not necessarily hypersexuality, but presenting with a symptom of hypersexuality. But those who are hypersexual are inertia from the beginning. They will first be hypersexual. They will find that they're living against their values. They will find that they are offending social systems. They will find that they are offending their own economic situations. Some drop out of school, some lose their jobs, some are divorcing. Now, all these problems then make them have depression and anxiety and other psychological and psychiatric problems. Now, thinking about what is causing all this, very difficult. When it is hypersexuality, ab initio from the beginning, it is a chemical disorder in the brain. We think so. And also emotional problems that make one not be able to really master their actions or control their feelings and their actions. So it is a disorder in that area of first, people think there could be a brain issue somewhere, some chemicals not being right, but ultimately they present as inability to manage your own sexuality. Say no when you want to say no, or control the thoughts that are coming to your mind and say, right now, I'm on NTV, I'm discussing this thing, I shouldn't be thinking about how to have sex, you know? So that inability is a disorder.
All right. And then again, when it comes to like the environment, what this person is exposed to, because I was listening to one guy who said the fact that I had, you know, access to all those things, the fact that I could see, you know, what was happening in my home, what happened, you know, in my neighborhood, it was so easy for me to always think about, you know, sex and, you know, like sexual encounters. So really, the environment, does it really, really contribute much, or it's more of a learned behavior?
Yeah, I wouldn't really say, you see, we all see our opposite sex or same sex in the streets, but we don't want to just have sex with them
all
anyhow.
of them.
Yeah, so the environment may not be the issue, unless, of course, we are talking about the environment where one has grown up, the family. We know that children who are neglected or who undergo trauma of some sort as they grow up in a family, it could be a dysfunctional family and other things, who from the beginning are having a lot of fears about themselves, about life, and a lot of shame and self-uncertainty. We know that many of them may end up with hypersexuality. So in the context of environment where one grows up and how they are supported to grow up comprehensively as a child, especially psychologically, that could be. But just the normal environment, I mean, we all have our phones, but we don't go to porn sites and take a lot of time just watching porn and masturbating. There has to be a problem when you're doing that all the time, to the extent that it is disrupting normal life activities.
Okay. All right. And then what about trauma? And especially when it comes to like sexual trauma. For instance, someone, let's say, was molested, someone was sodomized, because again, one of the guys also said that I was sexually abused when I was young. And even growing up, I found myself, you know, thinking about sex all the time. I did not care, you know, whether I was practicing safe sex or not. I did not care about all those things. And she said all this, I mean, he said all this stemmed from being sexually abused. So again, is this like a contributing factor?
Yes. So I talked about trauma while growing up. It could be sexual trauma. And it is very common, you know, sexual trauma, molestation of children is something which is very common in our communities. And it is shameful to talk about it, so people don't come out to get help. And so it can manifest in other ways. There are two extremes. Those who have undergone sexual trauma, rape, incest, and other things, can either totally shut off sex, they don't want it, they don't have desire for it, or it can go to the other extreme where they just lose it, they cannot control it, and they don't have value for it. And so they just do it, and they do it again, and they get some emotional relief out of it.
All right.
Then that is now sexual hypersexuality.
All right. And Dr. very quickly, before we go back to Catherine, how is it that then there are some people who, again, depending on the trauma, a person might not necessarily decide, but completely goes against it? I mean, we had a show one day, and this guy was like, from what I experienced when I was young, I did not want to do, or I did not want anything to do with sex or intimacy or partner, because every time I thought about it, I went back to how I was molested and raped when I was young. So how is it that then there's some people who completely go on the other side of the spectrum and others find themselves deeply into compulsive sexual behavior? Is it something to do with the brain and the memories stored in the brain?
It is about our different personalities. So if you traumatize someone based on their personality, how they are made up, they respond differently. And so you find there are those who, when they face sexual trauma at an early age, they shut their sexual feelings as a way of protecting their emotions, ego escape, a way to escape from that very hurtful scene. Because every time they are faced with a sexual scene, what they remember is that very difficult moment they went through. So that's another one group of people. Then there is another who will, because of their personality, the way they are made, they respond by letting it go. And so instead of controlling how they behave sexually, they find they have no control, and they actually get relief from getting sexual. And so it becomes like the medicine to heal that wound that is unhealed in their brain.
All right, a reward system, what Kate was talking about earlier on. So, Kate, let's come back to you. So then when does hypersexuality develop? When do we see the onset of the same?
Okay. So it's good that you brought up sexual trauma. So for parents, I always urge them to be more observant of their children when they're young. So I think in the olden times, and sometimes even now, you hear parents saying in Swahili, ana tabia mbaya, or my child is naughty. But it's nothing to do with naughtiness, because children do have sexual hyperactivity and they will act it out. So just like Stockholm syndrome, where the perpetrator, the victim identifies with the perpetrator, even in sexual trauma, the person will identify sometimes with the perpetrator. And it's a bit confusing for the child, because there is the reward system. Sex is pleasurable. And also there's the bit of it was not right the way it was done. So to answer the question you had of why is it that some people get repulsed by the sexual act and others become addicted to it, it just depends on the learning. So we normally say the subconscious has a natural way of adapting to things, and it can get new learning, and this is the adaptive information processing. It can get new learning and then integrate it into life. But if there is no new learning, what happens is the person keeps on repeating the unwanted behavior. So in both instances, the one who doesn't want anything to do with sex and the one who is hyperactive, hypersexual, both of them are not processing things correctly. They both need to address the trauma that happened to them.
Okay, all right then. And then, and especially for children, I like the fact that you brought up that point where tabia mbaya, right? Because one of the guys as well, we had a separate conversation, and he said, I could not report any of this, you know, where I was raped and I was sodomized as well. It's because the society says this as tabia mbaya. You cannot tell anyone what you're going through because they'll say, uko na tabia mbaya, right? So I think it's something that maybe we need to really put a lot of emphasis as a society in general. And also earlier on, we discussed a little bit about depression and how is it that a person can be depressed but really somewhat finds themselves driven into hypersexuality. Could you expound that just a little bit for us?
So when I said about the adaptive information processing, sex, just like other people who are addicted to substances, it's a form of avoidance. So for that fraction of a moment, this person feels alive and alert. And that's the reward system. Only that the adaptive information processing has been stored wrongly. So they try to use that in order to feel alive. That's the only thing they know how to regulate themselves with. And especially for people who have sexual trauma, they will revert to that depending on when the sexual trauma happened. Just the same way as people would revert to alcohol or other substances to regulate themselves. You hear people saying, I drink because I was stressed. I drink because I was happy. So even with depression, it's the same thing with sexual hyperactivity, that people will try to regulate themselves with what their subconscious best knows to relax them. So as much as it makes them relax at that particular time, it also does leave them with a lot of guilt and shame, because they're trying to find ways to regulate, and what they can regulate with them, there's a lot of stigma around it, and they feel out of control. I don't know whether I answered you, Remy.
All right. And Kate, very quickly, before we go on a break, earlier on, we also talked about, and I also had this from another psychologist who was like, listen, cases of masturbation, it is somewhat normal. But then again, when it becomes like excessive. So can we just understand how, and especially cases of masturbation and multiple sexual partners, also sometimes use of pornography might actually drive someone into compulsive sexual behavior. When does it become a problem? Is it that this person is not able to control it or to stop? Because there's some people who will tell you, yes, I masturbate, yes, I sometimes watch pornography, but does it automatically mean that they will then, quickly move into compulsive sexual behaviors very quickly before we go on a break?
So when does it become a problem? You're asking, when does masturbation become a problem?
Yes.
Now, if the person, currently we have phones. If the person is constantly checking their phones and they're not able to work because they want to watch some porn and then dash to the toilet and masturbate, that becomes a bit. Or when they're stressed, they will resort to masturbation. If they're using it to regulate, it's a learned behavior now that is building up. If their relationships, the intimate relationships are being affected by the behavior, that's another area of impairment, which we look into. So if the masturbation is making and affecting their sexual intimacy with their loved ones, then we look into it. If they're spending so much money and resources, data in order to access stuff that would help them get to that space of masturbating, then it becomes an issue.
All right. And
the other bit is personal. If they are feeling bad after the act, because most of the people will say there's a lot of guilt and shame around the act, and they would want it to stop. That also might also start to impair the person.
Okay. And then Dr. Sud, very, very quickly, is lack of it, that is lack of, let's say, sexual, encounter or intimacy, can that push one into compulsive sexual behavior? I'm pretty sure you have seen people or have met people who say, I can't get it at home. Either my wife or my girlfriend denies me all the time. So they find other ways of, trying to satisfy that desire. So lack of it completely, can that drive someone into hypersexuality?
Not really.
Okay.
I think that's a different problem.
Yeah.
Remember, there are people who decide to be celibate all their life, priests and nuns and others, and they are very okay. Nothing happens to them abnormally. So the values, I think the important thing here is if you have values and you're living those values, you are not regretting, you are not feeling ashamed about them, you are okay. So that when you're in marriage or in a sexual relationship and you are unable to have sex with your partner, it doesn't make you then start doing things that you don't believe and you regret about. For example, if you've never believed that one should have multiple sex partners and simply because you're lacking sex at home, you resort to that and you start regretting it, then there is a problem. So I think lack of sex at home is a different issue which needs to be sorted. People are unable to have sex at home due to many reasons, and they need to seek help for it. But it doesn't really lead to hypersexuality, but it may lead to an affair outside of the regular sex with someone else, and they will form another relationship and an emotional connection to that person, and be happy about it rather than being ashamed of it.
Okay, all right. Can't it lead to like another affair and another affair and another affair, and then you can't have anyways? All right, so let's take a break. But of course, when we come back, we'd also want to understand, because we've heard from the panel, that is Dr. Joachim Osu, who's a sexologist, and Catherine Bao, who is a psychologist as well as psychiatrist, that this affects both men and women. But then when it comes to its presentation or the symptoms, is it different between men and women? That is what we want to find out. So keep tweeting. Remember, we asked you, do you consider hypersexuality a disorder? Keep tweeting at NTV Kenya, at Lubembe_Winnie. I can see a number of your feedback and we'll be looking at them after this short break. But just in case you want to call in and talk to Dr. Osur or Catherine, again, feel free to do so. The numbers will be displayed on your screen when we come back after the break. But for now, let's take that break. See you shortly.
Not only are you weak, but you get away by bullying women. I will punch you and destroy you like the little cockroach that you are.
You accused me of something that wasn't true. Then you couldn't actually talk about it.
Okay, so first you treat me like crap, and then you're catching feelings because I won't discuss it with you.
Just enjoy it while it lasts. See you in 5 years. You know, after Moses, I wish I had time for chit-chat. I think you better leave.
Umetoka hapo na sasa hivi saa ngapi?
Nimekupata text yangu.
Unafaa uchague mimi na wewe ama hao marafiki wako wa usiku.
Kuwa smart na ujaribu Zenka 0% loans for first-time borrowers. Zenka, smart loans for smart people.
Tusirudi nyuma kwa mipaka na nchi kufungwa. Tusirudi kwa biashara na shule kufungwa. Kwa kutoweza kukutana. Kwa kutengana na tuwapendao. Tusirudi nyuma.
Na kuhitaji unikinge, pata chanjo.
Ili tuendelee na maisha vizuri.
Na kuhitaji unikinge, pata chanjo.
Na kuhitaji unikinge,
pata chanjo.
Na kuhitaji unikinge,
pata chanjo.
Na kuhitaji unikinge, pata chanjo.
Ili tuendeleze maisha bora kwa ajili ya wapendao, nchi yetu na usoni wetu. Kwa ajili yetu sisi sote. Pata chanjo. Kaa chonjo. Kuhakikisha nchi yetu na uchumi wetu umestawi katika uwazi. Tusirudi nyuma.
Every Friday at 10 p.m., NTV is dubbed as the home to the biggest and most fascinating people on TV. We give you a fix of the latest trends in entertainment, pack your eardrums with the freshest hits, and bring you the biggest names in the 254 and beyond. Energy, synergy, fun and flair. If it's hot, it's on the trend. If it's not, well... Catch this exhilarating show every Friday from 10 p.m. with the freshest trio, Osoro Biamono, the Scratch Master himself, DJ E, and your sassy homegirl, Amina Abdi Rabar. All this on the trend, only on NTV.
You're cheating on me.
Then go to a shrink, ask for some pills, stretch on that couch, and talk about your problems. Go on a trip with your friends. I'm sick and tired of your jealousy.
Am I the only one with issues? You don't think you're responsible?
What?
You come across a problem, you turn to a friend. First it's Laguna, now it's Cardenas. You're naive and you swallow every lie you're told, Elena. I thought we were smarter than that.
What do you need these for? Who are you at war with?
You know how this works. We never saw each other.
Speak up, because if you don't, I'm definitely going to lose my patience. Speak up, Gata!
I do have feelings for Pablo.
Return of Lucas in association with Nivea Nourishing Cocoa Body Lotion.
Celebrate the skin you're in and dress with confidence with Nivea Nourishing Cocoa Body Lotion. The triple layered care of deep moisture serum, precious cocoa butter, and vitamin E enriches your skin for 48 hours. It's time to show off your best skin. Wear your skin with pride every time with Nivea Nourishing Cocoa Body Lotion.
It's back. Renewed in worship and inspiration, let your spirit man be fed in music that connects you to his throne room. Arise and be lifted in one voice as we worship in truth and in spirit.
Ili tuendeleze maisha bora kwa ajili ya wapendao, nchi yetu na usoni wetu, kwa ajili yetu sisi sote. Pata chanjo, kaa chonjo, kuhakikisha nchi yetu na uchumi wetu umestawi katika uwazi. Tusirudi nyuma.
All right, welcome back. Glad you're still with us. This is Your World, and today it's all about compulsive sexual behavior, or if you like, hypersexuality, or for some people, sex addiction. And of course, the question that we're asking you today is, do you consider hypersexuality a disorder? Once again, do you consider hypersexuality as a disorder? Feel free to interact with us, and we look forward to hear what you have to say. But we also, did a poll, and we asked you as well, do you consider hypersexuality a disorder? And 56.1% of you said absolutely yes, and 43.9% are saying no. So for those of you who are saying no, tell us why. Or for those of you who also say yes, tell us why, and we'll be sampling that. Remember, you have 55 minutes left to vote and say, and tell us rather, that whether you consider hypersexuality a disorder. As of now, it is 56.1%, those ones who say yes, and 43.9% who say no. So let's hear what you have to say as far as the question that we asked you. And that is, do you consider hypersexuality a disorder? And someone says it is not a disorder, it is a habit. All right, it's not a disorder, it is a habit. All right, and then someone else says, do you equal negative effects? Yes, although I am open to other point of view statements. All right. And then someone else says, in simple times, it is just lust. All right. This person continues to say science name trying to make it sound like just a disorder when it is sin that separates many from their creator. Says, run to Jesus with a genuine heart and you'll be free. All right. And then someone else says, it is a sign of demonic attack. It is a serious thing, but the blood of Jesus can break those chains. All right. This is Mumu Ezekiel. And then Peter Boli says, I was exactly that way 3 weeks ago, but God ni nani. All right, Peter, would want to hear your story. Please tweet in or just call in and tell us more. And then Okoth Wood Okech says, glory to God for delivering me from that chain of slavery. Would want to hear more. Feel free to share if you can. And then Moses El Karani says, no, it is a state of mind that can be controlled in different ways. For example, men engage in physical activities, right, diet, and positive thoughts. All right. And then, yeah, so that is what Moses says as far as hypersexuality is concerned. And of course, we'll be sampling more of your feedback as we continue with the discussion. But again, remember the question that we're asking is, do you consider hypersexuality a disorder? Keep tweeting at NTV Kenya at Lubembe_Winnie. For those ones who are saying no, tell us why. Why do you think that hypersexuality is not a disorder? And for those of you, again, who say yes, it is a disorder, again, feel feel free to expound more and tell us why you feel it is a disorder. And of course, to continue with the discussion, we still have Dr. Joachim Osul, who is a sexologist, and Catherine Bao, who is a psychotherapist, just helping us understand more as far as hypersexuality is concerned. If you want to speak to any of them, again, we give you a chance. The numbers are down on your screen. Give us a call. You don't really have to say your name because we understand the stigma that comes with the same, and we'll address that stigma in just a moment. And just share, your story, or just tell them or ask the question that you have. And of course, we'll try as much as possible to answer all of them as far as hypersexuality is concerned. Dr. Joachim and Catherine as well, do you want to respond to or to react rather to the feedback that we got? There are some people who are saying, listen, it is not a disorder. In fact, it is a disability. All right, Dr. Joachim, what do you make of that?
Yeah, very interesting. I think two things. One is that the definition is difficult. And as we said from the beginning, sex desire was never meant to be abnormal. And in fact, you are abnormal if you have no sex desire.
At all. Yeah.
But I think the definition of then what is hypersexuality? What is this beyond the normal desire? How does it present? I think people are having difficulty with that because people can't understand how suddenly the desire is so much that it can be disruptive to your life and you can't control it. And actually, that's the definition. It is so disruptive. You are thinking of sex all the time. You are fantasizing sex all the time. You're using a lot of resources to actualize those fantasies. And you feel you don't want it. You can't control it. You're helpless. And I think that is what people don't understand. And so they are saying, ni watu wenye mademons and so on. It also depends on how you are socialized. I think the other thing is really just personal values, which are really diverse when it comes to sex. And so we tend to judge. And this is one reason why most people with sex problems will not even come out because they fear being judged. So I would say I understand when almost 50% there is that division. People are saying this is not normal. Others are saying this is very normal. Why do you allow it to happen? It's those two things.
All right. And then Catherine as well, do you want to react to the same? Because again, we've seen, I think, 2 people who said, I was struggling with this about 3 weeks ago and God delivered me. What do you have to say to the same?
So if it's normal or it's a disability, it's a learned behavior, there are many definitions to it, but sex desire in itself, it's healthy. The preoccupation with it is what is not healthy, and if it impairs you. For the one who prayed and they got healing, it means that their spirituality became their source of regulation. So they got something else that I think in addiction we say in AA that restored them to normalcy. They realized they couldn't deal with it, they prayed about it, and they felt comfort in knowing that prayer works for them. And this is for people who have that belief system. And our belief systems are different. So in the part of, is it normal to have hyperactivity or hypersexuality, or is the person in control? That's where the bone of contention is. So for someone who's not had serious of complex trauma and attachment trauma, and it's not repeated, because this one was last week. So it's not someone who's been in it for a long period in their life. The one who has learned it for long, yes, someone said it's a learned behavior. It is a reward system, so they need time to get over it and find out what it does for them. So this one found prayer, someone else finds exercises as the thing that sorts them out. So, but at the end of the day, if it impairs the person, it's still something of concern.
All right.
Whether it's a disorder yet, in the psychological world, we are still debating about it, but HWO does deem it as a disorder.
All right. And also, and especially for the person who said, hey, I was struggling with this for, in the last 3 weeks, is it so easy to come out of it? And I know we'll talk about the treatment options a little bit later. I think that is one of the things that you would want to address, and that is it easy to come out of it? Because there's some people who said, me, I just prayed, and again, I was able to come out of it. But like you said, again, their spirituality is what gave them, for instance, the strength to come out of it. But then again, that question of how then does it manifest itself differently, let's say in men and in women, because we've had a lot of discussions around just sex in general, and there's a lot of people who say men think about it more, like men are more sexual as compared to women. So Dr. Osur, I mean, being a sexologist, I'm really, really curious to find out cases of hypersexuality. Does it present, is it different when it comes to its presentation or characteristics when it comes to men and women?
Is the same. It is basically the same. And I think, well, naturally, men are supposed to think more about sex because of the testosterone that men have. It is a little higher than the testosterone that women have. This is what causes men to think more about sex and to be the initiators of sexual relationships and also of intimate moments. But when it comes to hypersexuality, the drive, the thoughts, the inability to control them, and the behaviors that result and the harm is all the same between men and women. And nobody's spared of the those difficult, issues they have to deal with.
All right. And then, so how do you know? For example, maybe couples are watching us right now and thinking, by the way, how do I know that, let's say, my partner, for example, has like compulsive sexual behavior? Can we just go through it? I know we mentioned it a little bit during the first phase of the show, but can we just go through it in terms of helping people understand these are some of the symptoms to watch out for, and this tells you if this person has compulsive sexual behavior or they just have a higher sex drive?
Yeah, there are two scenarios when it comes to partners living together in marriage or as close sexual associates. Sometimes it is the unaffected partner who comes to see me.
All right, Dr. Joachim, Catherine. Okay, all right. Doctor, do we have you back?
And they are on with their partner. You can hear me?
Yes. Yes, we can hear you now.
All right, sorry for that. So sometimes it is the normal of the two who comes for consultation. And they're saying, look, I had sex with this man, and then I realized he left the bed and went to masturbate. And I realized he's doing this again and again. Or there are cases where I've had cases where this man has like 4 or 5 women, relationships all going on, sex every day with all of them. And then the wife gets to discover this and says, this is not normal, can we sort it? And the guy is actually genuinely trying to sort it, but again and again he's falling back. And so you find it is the wife who may come and say, I think there is something not normal with this person. Because many times, because of the gratification one gets from it, the result of the pressure being relieved by doing it, sometimes they don't want to come and be treated because they're getting some relief of a hurtful thing from it. So that is one scenario. The other scenario is where, especially in middle age, because our bodies wear out, you cannot cope with this level of activity all the time. And so sometimes people present with sexual dysfunction, other sexual dysfunctions. They are unable to have an erection, or they're having painful sex. If it's a woman, they're doing it again and again and again. The body, the physical body is wearing out, and they're unable to manage the level of activity that the body is pushing them to do. So when we take history and do a lot of examinations, then we realize the failure of the body is resulting from too much activity that the body is not coping with. Sometimes early in life, they're able to really do it and manage, but as time goes, they are unable. And so they are coming with these other dysfunctions. And you might find for the first time in their late 30s, in 40s, people being diagnosed with hypersexuality, which has been there all along. But because now they are unable to cope, they are coming to treat the erectile dysfunction or the sexual pain that they are having. And sometimes they have been swallowing a lot of the blue pill to cope the pressure, to maintain an erection. And it is failing again and things like that. So there are many ways of presentation. It could be the partner, it could be the person themselves.
All right. I have a question, Dr. Terry, in terms of, like you said, you know, in an intimate relationship, right? This person does not feel satisfied, goes to the bathroom, completes the act, and then comes back. But then again, where then do you draw the line? Because if you ask a lot of women, and even some men, they'll tell you sometimes it's difficult to get there, right? So that my partner is not satisfying me the way I want. So in order to not make them feel bad, I will just go to the bathroom, complete the act, and then come back, right? So then where do you draw the line? Because there's some people who are like, yeah, this is normal. It happens like almost all the time. Or in all, maybe almost all relationships.
Yeah, definitely there are cases where you have a discordance in sexual desire, where one partner wants more sex than the other. That happens. And it's very common also. Someone wants to have sex twice a week, another one wants to have sex once a month. And so the one who wants more may want to look for other ways of satisfying that need. But that is different. That's different. In hypersexuality, they can even have satisfactory sex with their partners, but
still
the urge doesn't go. They continue, they want more. And they do, in addition to the satisfactory sexual partner with the wife or the husband, they have had their orgasm or they have had their ejaculation, they still feel something. They want to do more a few minutes after or a few hours after. And because one partner cannot cope with some of these excessive desire, they resort to these other means of relieving it, either through another partner, through masturbation, or a combination of all these things. And the thing here, as we said earlier, and Kathy repeated that, is that
all right, Dr.
I can't.
Okay, you're back.
I don't want it, but it keeps happening again and again. And I feel tired. I don't want it. But when the urge is there, I have to do it. That is where the difference is. That is function in being able to manage your own desire, so that you're always a victim of the desire and a victim of the sexual act. It's like enslaving to you. It's enslaving in the mind and in the body, because you don't want it, but you have to do it to get some relief, and then you feel bad about it.
Okay, and that is just sad. Like it's just so sad, because you really want it, you have no control over it, but you end up feeling bad instead of feeling good, for example, you know, after fulfilling that desire. So we'll also talk about how then does this impact, let's say, a relationship, or even as a person, really the impact that hypersexuality will have on a person in just a moment. That is on this, the last phase of the show. And when then do you see a doctor as far as, you know, hypersexuality is concerned? But then again, so for women, I would say, and Catherine, I would ask you this, because again, Dr. Sur pointed out something that partners are very different. There's some who have like a higher sexual drive as compared to the others, but I'm pretty sure you've had a lot of women say, yeah, my partner, there's a way that they do not, you know, satisfy me. So they would also find other ways of trying to satisfy themselves. So what does it look like, especially in a woman?
The hypersexuality.
Yeah, and the fact
that...
Go ahead.
with definition is with the frequency per day. So there's those ones who have high sex drive, which is a healthy one, and has no reason, and a couple can work out their differences in ways that are amicable and are not emotionally distressful to each other. But with the frequency of how much time they need to have their sexual needs satisfied is where now we term hyperarousal and hypersexuality. So if it's, I think the one that deems it is 5 times to 6 times or more in a day. So here's someone who has had sexual encounters in a day, like I've had 5 or more. And there are others who have medical conditions where they can't regulate their orgasm and everything, and that's medical. So that needs to be checked into, which falls under sexual dysfunctions. But when it comes to the compulsive sexual behavior, is the frequency that the person desires to have sex. But it's not with the high sexual drive, because the high sexual drive doesn't mean that they're constantly on it, just like, and they're in control. But when they feel they have no control over their desire, that they can't wait and plan for it, then it becomes an impairment.
Okay. All right. Just in case someone is watching us and thinking, but, well, maybe I think I have a higher sex drive as compared to compulsive sexual behavior. Or someone might actually have compulsive sexual behavior and thinking, listen, this is normal. I have like a higher sex drive. Just to make it very easy for people to understand, when we say a sexual or higher sex drive, is it the number of times? Again, is it more of a frequency, or is it the fact that you have control? Doesn't matter how many times you do it in a day.
Ask me again.
When it comes to higher sex drive and compulsive sexual behavior, probably there's someone who's watching us and thinking, I have a higher sexual drive. It is not compulsive sexual behavior. Or maybe they have compulsive sexual behavior. It's just that then they think that they have a higher sex drive. So then how do you differentiate the two to make it clear for people to understand? Is it more on the frequency or the fact that one has control as compared to the other?
So when do they draw the line? Do I have a high sex drive,
yes,
or do I have hypersexuality?
Yeah.
Where do I draw the line? So where you draw the line is, what does it make you get impaired? Is it affecting your relationship? Is it, do you feel like you're gonna die if you don't have it? Are you in control of it? Because as a healthy sex drive is knowing, yes, I have a healthy one, and my husband is not satisfying me, or my wife is not satisfying me, and talking it out. And you'll go to someone else, but you won't go, it's not a daily thing. It's not a preoccupation when am I gonna get my next fix?
Yes.
It's a normal desire that I feel, yeah, I can plan around this. It's not, I can't survive without it. I need it like yesterday. But with a high sex drive is knowing that I'm a sexual being, and it's okay for me to be sexual and desire sex. And if I can't have it, it's okay. I can make time to when I can have it. Let me give an example with cake. So a slice of cake is good, but having the whole cake, as much as I desire to have a cake, having the whole cake, is it good for me?
Maybe I
Do
have
I
a
have
huge
control?
appetite.
Yeah?
Maybe I have a
Pardon?
huge appetite. I can finish a whole cake.
Yes, you're finishing a whole cake, but is it good for you? Are you finishing the whole cake because you feel you have control and you have chosen? Or are you finishing the whole cake because you can't help? The cake is there and you need to finish it up.
Yeah. I see that. I see that. Even
So
like,
with-
yeah. I was saying, oh, Kate, we can't hear you. All right, Kate, even as kids sorts that out. Doctor, do you want to chime into that as far as control and how much control you can have as far as a higher sex drive is concerned?
Well, yeah, I think high sex drive is different from hypersexuality.
Yeah.
There are few things I would take as pointers to hypersexuality or sex addiction.
Mm-hmm.
Number one is, are you proud of the sexual act that you just had?
Mm.
You feel good that you had it. Mm-hmm. Number two, other than the physical act, are you emotionally connected to the person that you're having sex with? So that it goes beyond just a physical act. Number three, after that sexual encounter, how do you feel? You feel empty? You feel helpless? You feel guilty? You feel shame? And you know, we talked about religion and religious people and how people pray and they get out of it. Do you feel that you need to pray to get out of this sexual situation? That you are continuously praying for God to help you get out of it? It means there is a problem. And also, there are personal values that people, you know, there are things you believe in as a person. Are you able to marry your sexual behavior with your values and make choices and say, I am choosing this because this is what I want, because this is good for me. I'm proud of.
All right. All right. Kate, are you back? With our cake analogy. Kate? All right, Kate, we can't still hear you. All right. Okay. Can we take a break as we sort Kate's connection together with Dr. Orsura? And of course, when we come back, we'll also be looking at your feedback as far as hypersexuality or compulsive sexual behavior is concerned, and also we'll also look at the impact that it has on either a person or a relationship. Really, what impact does it have, and especially if it is not treated either on time or it is not treated at all, what impact does it have on a person or a relationship? So you do not want to miss that part of the conversation. Stay with us. This is Your World. We'll see you right after.
Subscribe to Classic Bouquet on aerial decoder for 899 shillings or Smart Bouquet on satellite for only 999 shillings, or you can watch on the Star Times On app. Star Times, home of the Africa Cup of Nations 2021.
Burgers for $6. Did you say $6? Your favorite moment?
Now your favorite ice cream. It's so good.
Order what you want to select what you want.
Order it now. Download the app, order a Glovo, and we get it.
I'm growing up, I'm growing into every moment.
Thanks, Mom.
So if I
Nurture the moment with Minute Maid Delight. Now available in tropical, orange, mango, and apple flavors.
Let's see what they're developing right now.
Molfix pants with anatomic fit technology. New Molfix pants, an invention from babies for babies.
You should also try Molfix.
us, is there corruption in the judiciary?
Corruption is the biggest problem facing the judiciary. Lifestyle audit. I mean, they are judged with huge properties.
Integrity training has to start very, very early. It's a societal problem.
Where does a judge get money to buy a mall?
Perhaps he's a good judge.
No.
He's an excellent judge.
We know all the salaries is from 500 to 1 million shillings, you know. The government is not fighting corruption when it arrests the judge. It's fighting a political war. We are so tired, we are so desperate about corruption at all levels that we don't know, you know, what to do next.
Ili tuendeleze maisha bora kwa ajili ya wapendao, nchi yetu na usoni wetu, kwa ajili yetu sisi sote. Pata chanjo, kaa chonjo, kuhakikisha nchi yetu na uchumi wetu umestawi katika uwazi. Tusirudi nyuma.
All right, we are on the last phase of the show, and that is your world. And today, of course, our focus of discussion is on compulsive sexual behavior. And I must say, we're learning a lot, and I'm pretty sure that you are learning a lot as well as far as compulsive sexual behavior is concerned. And remember, we have Dr. Joachim Osur, who is a sexologist, as well as Catherine Bao, who is a psychotherapist, joining us via Zoom. Thank you very much for sticking with us. And of course, the question that we're asking you today is all about, do you consider hypersexuality as a disorder? Do you consider hypersexuality a disorder? A lot of you have a lot to say. There you go, question of the day, and that is, do you consider hypersexuality a disorder? Let's hear what you have to say. So Lukwamo says, I would say no, because it is a behavior, or should I say a habit, since one has to control yourself in any situation, no matter what happens. For I have been doing for fun, and I can also control myself and live without it for some time. All right. And then Sandra says, no, it's not. It is a habit like smoking and drinking that one gradually creates. Come to think of it, in marriage, you can go without intimacy even for 2 months. So it is a bad habit. All right. And then Sami_Murambi says, yes, absolutely. When you do the opposite of what God made you to be, in fact, it is another form of disability, not just a disorder. And then Jacqueline K. Muthe says, some people don't even realize that they are having a disorder. Take charge of your sexuality. All right. And then Lazarus Gatimu says, today you have hit on me really hard. How can we cope with the condition? All right. Lazarus, stay tuned. And then Alulua 474 says, nothing like hyper or disorder. Men have literally grown weak. Porn is the drug causing this. Look at the ancient man who had no this funny disorders, but currently men have become weak and cannot be able to approach prospective sexual partners. Porn is the drug. All right. And of course, I'd want you to respond, Dr. Joachim and Catherine as well. But before you respond to the feedback, we have a caller on the line. Is it Vincent from Bomet? Good morning. Thank you very much for calling us today. Do you have a question?
Yes, I have a question.
All right. Go ahead.
It's not, tough for me to engage in sexual activity is also enough like smoking or taking alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
So there is no mistake, but you have only to control yourself.
Mm-hmm. Vincent, could you please turn down the volume of your TV so that we can communicate?
Yes.
All right. Ask your question. Okay, we seem to have lost Vincent, but if I heard him correctly, I think he was just asking a question on control. Like, for example, just like, alcohol or any other drug, the question is on control. And I'd want Catherine to respond to the same, and especially couple that with also the feedback, some of the people who said, yeah, this is just bad habit. It is something that you can control, but people have just decided not to control it. What do you have to say, Catherine?
So I'll go back to the question where I got cut out. So you know that it's a problem, just like any addiction. When you're using it to cope, you're using it to regulate yourself. So yes, people say that, yeah, people should have control and it's a bad habit. But the other thing I would want to highlight that compulsive sex behavior is a symptom that addresses that something needs to be addressed. So question would be, what does this do for the person? Apart from being healthy sexual beings, what is the reward system that this behavior does? Is it gratification? Is it regulation? Is it ego boost? That's what needs to be addressed. And to address to other people, as much as people are saying it's a bad behavior, for people who have had sexual trauma or people who have some brain damage in part of the frontal lobe, it's not something they can control. That is something that needs to be addressed medically. So there are situations where it is not controllable, it's an urge that comes, and it's an urge as hunger. The reason why there is hesitation in defining it as a disorder is the mere fact that it is a need. It is a basic need that we are born with, and it does cause impairment. And it's a thin line between having a high libido and having a compulsive sex behavior. And as Dr. said, it's when things are impaired in our life because of this behavior. And it's not as easy as switching it off. So like the previous example we had gotten, someone got a solution by building resource, and the way they both built the emotional resource is they found it in spirituality. So when they go through treatment, what you want to enforce is what is their resource system in terms of social support system, in terms of self-regulation, in terms of exercise, eating, and all the like. So it's not as simple as waking up and switching off from that behavior. But from others, it is. That's why we are dynamic. But
true.
for others, it's really a problem that they struggle with, which has a lot of shame and guilt entangled into it. And that's what makes it now a disorder. Because of the other things that come with it, the emotional impairment that comes with that.
All right. And Dr. I'd also want you to respond to, I think, that feedback where someone said it is nothing to do with a disorder or hyper, whatever it is. Men have just become weak. And, give an example, comparison of the ancient man and all those things. Really, what do you have to say to this?
Yeah, I'm not a prophet, but I can tell you for free right now, for those who are watching this program, there are those who are crying, really shedding tears because they can identify with the problem we are discussing. And they're asking themselves, how can I be judged so harshly? I wish someone could help. They are out there. It's not an easy experience. The problem with sexual disorders or problems like what we are discussing now is that there are also value issues and social judgments that make it so difficult for people to come out and seek help. And so I would say we need to be more loving of those who may be going through this and other sexual problems, so that they don't feel like they are suffering and we are also stigmatizing them. This is not a normal condition. It's not a decision you make that I want to masturbate 3 times today and have 2 more women. It's a hurtful situation. And so even though psychologists, psychiatrists, sexual medicine people are still trying to see where to place it and give it a proper definition, and so there is that scientific debate of how we should position it. It doesn't mean that it is a normal condition that someone imposes on themselves. It's a difficult life experience, and we need to find a way of helping those who are suffering.
Yeah, and someone also sent in a tweet and said, today it's like you're really, really, talking to me. And of course, the question that he asked is, how then do we cope with this? Dr.
Yeah, it is important to seek help. I hear, Catherine, when people say we have prayed and God helped us. And it does happen. I don't disagree with that. But also, seeking medical help really is important because God has also given medical people some other ways of doing it. And I'm saying this because in my practice, I meet pastors, I meet priests, I meet, very religious people who are praying every day for this thing to go away, and it is not going. I remember one case where in the day, the guy is preaching, in the night, the streets looking for sex workers to satisfy that need. I know people who are masturbating in church. Most. So God is there, but I think real treatment that is scientific is also very important. And I would encourage people not to feel, not to hide. Go out and seek help because the help is there. And get treatment.
Okay. All right. Catherine, do you feel like with someone like hiding? I know there's a lot of discussions of, as far as, we as a people, as Kenyans, as a society, the fact that we're very hypocritical, We tend to hide a lot, but then again, we still, the very, very same things that we're condemning is what we are doing, this is behind the curtains.
So I agree with Dr. It's not as simple as people think it is. There are people who are suffering in silence because of the stigma around sexuality. We have people who want to get married, but because they struggle with this, they feel demonized and they don't know how to deal with it. So they keep quiet because people don't like talking about sex in Kenya. Yeah? It is a hush-hush.
It's a very taboo topic.
It is. Yeah, you just go make babies and not talk about it. And what happens in the bedroom stays in the bedroom. Whether, because either way, as I said before, lack of it and too much of it
is a problem.
It's still deemed as a disorder by HWO. And the fact that we haven't figured out a name for it in the medical world does not mean it's not an issue. So yes, we are hiding away from it, but there are many people who are out there who need help. And we are also very hard on each other. Just the same way people tell alcoholics, you just need to stop drinking. It is not as simple as stopping to drink, because by the time we deem an addict as an addict, is that they have come to a realization they can't drink as gentlemen. So by the time someone is coming and saying, I do have a compulsive sexual behavior, or I'm asexual, there is something that behavior is communicating that needs to be addressed. So I agree with Dr. Ari. There is help and people need to get out. There's medical, there's therapy that they need to get out and just be bold enough, courageous enough to say, you know what? I can't do this on my own. I've tried and I can't.
All right. Yeah. Okay, Dr. Ari, take us through the diagnosis process of hypersexuality. And of course, Kate will come back to you in terms of then the impact that it has either on a person's mental well-being.
Something they think is not normal, we do full assessment. First, we would normally want to find out are they biologically okay? Are the hormones fine? So we will take a lot of medical history, we'll do a lot of medical tests. You know, as we said before, there are some medicines with a symptom of hypersexuality. For example, if the hormone testosterone is too high, or some other, medical problems. We talk about bipolar, psychiatric problem, where one symptom in the manic phase, the hyper phase, one symptom is being hypersexual. So we would like to really a full medical assessment, do medical tests, ensure that the body is not the cause of this behavior. But then there is also social assessment. We've talked about people having grown up maybe in a very difficult family, people having been neglected maybe when they were young, people having grown in a lot of fear because of what was happening at that level, or people having been assaulted sexually. All these can then manifest later as hypersexuality or some other behavioral problem. So we would like to really investigate the social setting where someone has grown up and what they have gone through that makes them the adults that we now see. So that's another important assessment. And then, of course, psychological assessment. Psychological sexual assessment is very important. The thoughts that one has about sex, how frequent they are, whether they are good thoughts, pleasurable thoughts, or hurtful thoughts when they think of sex, whether these thoughts are disruptive to someone's life, and whether these thoughts are actually being turned into behaviors that are risky for the person and disrupting their normal, normal lives, whether it is at the workplace or at family level, or in their profession, or their investments and all that. So it's a really detailed assessment that is done before we arrive at a diagnosis of hypersexuality. And then based on what one finds along the way, the biological, the social, the psychological, a treatment can be designed based on all that. And many times it's not one thing. There could be a lot of other things that are accompanying the hypersexuality. There could be anxiety, there could be depression somewhere, either as a result of this behavior or sometimes, as we've said, other diseases as a cause of the behavior. Yeah.
Okay. A very, very long process, I must say, right? And Kate, so what are some of the treatment options that are available for someone who is really, really struggling with hypersexuality?
There's a lot of assessment, history taking, so that we can identify what modality to use. So once the physical bit has been ascertained, that sometimes there might not be anything physically off with the client. So if everything is intact, there's no brain damage, there's no excess hormonal release, and everything is okay, the procedures would be first addressing the comorbidities. So if there's depression, have it treated. If there's anxiety, have it treated to stabilize the client to where they can benefit from behavioral therapy. Yeah. And in behavioral therapy, we are also looking at cognitive behavioral therapy or EMDR for trauma. So you're doing even a history intake of their trauma. Is there any trauma in their life? Do we need to address this? So that we can assist the brain to store memories correctly so that they can stop repeating same behaviors that are not helpful for them. So one, if there is a medical issue, it needs to be addressed. Two, if there is a psychiatric issue, it needs to be addressed by form of medication. And then now we start addressing the emotional issue, where the psychologist and the sex therapist will come in to address them. So if there's trauma, it needs to be addressed before now the compulsive behavior can be addressed.
All right. And then, so for instance, medication or therapy, does one have to be on it maybe long term, or is it on a specific duration of time?
Okay. For if there's mental illness in the family, some of this might be something that the person needs to learn to live with. But if it's trauma related, what we believe that the mind can also heal itself naturally, just like the body, but it needs to be given time. So it depends, Winnie, on whether there's a history of mental illness in the family. So this might be medication they might choose for a long time. But if it's trauma resulted, sorry about my voice, if it's trauma related, once you address the trauma and then when the subconscious, this is the beauty about our mind, when the subconscious gets its resolve and connects the dots as to why this is very important, then the person can have new learning to be regulated. So there are people we know that will be on treatment for long term. We are people that we know, especially when there's sexual trauma, that they will need psychosocial support in terms of therapy all through certain stages of their life. When they get married, when they're having kids, when their kids get to that bit, sometimes their trauma might be triggered. These are people that we know we'll see for quite some time. However, it's not as hopeless because sometimes when you tell people like that, they'll be like, then what's the point?
What's the point? Yes. There's always
no,
hope.
It's not a death sentence because just like our body, the way it heals when it gets a wound, the same is our mind. However, we need to help it to get to that point where we've had people who, like the case that was sharing when we started, when she connected her dots after several years of self-work, she did connect her dots and her sexual desire has gone. It also depends on the age. So for each individual, Winnie, it's different. It depends on the history we are taking. If it's
Okay. All right. So we need to end the show like right now. So Dr. Joachim, very, very briefly, if this is left untreated, what are some of the complications very quickly? And then can it be prevented? Those two questions in like very few seconds.
I think the social harm. Oh, sorry.
All right.
Yes.
Yes, Doctor.
If left sorry, yeah. The social harm can be damaging. You know, lose their families because of this. People lose their investments. People lose their jobs. All over the place now, we talk of safeguarding in the job place. You're trying to be sexual with all over the place. You're with everyone or doing.
All right.
Inappropriate sexual behaviors at work, they will sack you. So the social harm can really be a lot. But also health-wise, when the body cannot cope. And so you find that you have to then get treated because your body is precious. So if you don't do that, then you deteriorate, you get other problems. But social harm, I think, is really great. Now, my social support, and now we even have those groups that are anonymous that one can join. The support of your religious person, as a leader, for example, very important. The support of your spouse, very important in healing. Social support. And people would like to open up if they are sure that they will be supported. So I hope that if you're having someone with possible problems like this, that you're able to open up, supporting them, so that they also come out knowing that they will not be judged.
All right. And Kate, as we finish this very quickly, in terms of then someone who's watching us and thinking, you know, what else for me? You know, what do I do? How do I cope with this? Or even those people who stigmatize themselves based on what they're going through, what would you tell them?
I would tell them to be patient with themselves and to be kind to themselves. And yes, look for, we normally say social support is the first resource, but we are also very aware there are some people who don't have social support by the time they come to us. So the one thing for the person who's been very hard on them is to be kind to themselves. Imagine if it was a friend and a friend was saying the things they're telling themselves, how that friend would feel. So I would emphasize, please seek help. There is help. And as Dr. was saying, we normally say the social support network is very important in the path of healing. But even by the lack of it, we still can build resources where this person can find to ground themselves to heal. So for that person, I'm just letting them know there's a light at the end of the tunnel. There's nothing, it's not you, it's how this information was introduced to you at whatever age. And maybe some of it is a bit blank. And if you seek help, you will be able to connect the dots.
I like that. I like
and that you will find answers.
Yeah, there's always answers. Thank you very much, Kate. So Dr. Joachim Osur, who is a sexologist, as well as Catherine Bao, who is a psychotherapist. Thank you very, very much, to both of you for joining us this morning and just giving us insights really on what we need to understand as far as hypersexuality or compulsive sexual behavior is all about. And I liked what both of you are saying. Social support is very, very important. Let's not stigmatize. If anything, let's try as much as possible and help people who are struggling with hypersexuality to find help. There's always help, all right? So thank you very much to both of you, Dr. and Catherine, and thank you very much as well for watching. I believe that you've learned a lot. And for those who actually texted in or sent in a tweet and said, I am struggling, I hope that you found all the answers that you were looking for. And like they said, there's always help. So my name is Winnie Lubembe. Enjoy the rest of your day. We have to close it here, but we'll see you tomorrow morning for another show, and that is On Your World. But until then, remember to stay safe and God bless. See you tomorrow.